Hi everyone and welcome to Studio Jake. I of course am your host Jacob Airy. I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction today. I normally talk about entertainment and pop culture stuff, but a lot of you know that I'm also a writer. I've written 2 novels so far. So today I wanted to give some other potential authors and writers who might be reading this some ideas on where they can learn about the craft of writing a fictional novel. I've got I've got 5 picked out, and keep in mind this is not like an objective, the top 5 must-read books. These are 5 books that have helped me in my career I should say my beginning career as a fiction writer. So I want to give that information to you, and if you listen to this and you like it, I highly recommend getting all of these books. They, like I said, they really helped me out, and so I want them to help you as well. So with that in mind, be sure to like this video, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, ring that little bell, turn on all notifications, because YouTube does this weird thing where they curate your subscription feed. Don't know why they do that, but they do. So you don't get everything in chronological order. That's why you need notifications. Facebook, also turn on all notifications, like this page, and give this video a thumbs up and share it out to everyone that you know. With that in mind, sit back, relax, and welcome to Studio Jake. Alright, so this is going to be another shorter video. I've been doing kind of shorter videos just because of everything that's going on in the world today. And yesterday I had a case of the Mondays. Today I wish I could say I had a case of the Tuesdays. That's not a fact. I'm just trying to do shorter videos so I have more time to do things. It doesn't take as long to edit them. So if you're missing my long videos, don't worry. We'll probably resume doing those shortly. Okay. So anyway, 5 writing craft books. Now, what are craft books for writers? So they have them for every type of writer you can imagine, especially nonfiction, fiction, academic. And I used to think as a writer that I didn't need to read craft books, that I could just go with the flow, learn about it, and understand it, and I would just pick up things as I went. And that was actually very detrimental to my first novel. Now, to be clear, I stand by my first novel. I think it's well written. I do a good job. But if I had had the tools that I had learned from these craft books, I think it could have been better. And we definitely see this all over the place. And so while I was writing my second novel and was making outlines for other potential novels I want to write, I started reading craft books, and I still read them. Like, even though I'm working really hard on my third novel and working on other books as well, I really see the value in reading these craft books. I think it's important. Now, if you hear crashing and stuff, it's garbage day in Los Angeles. I don't know how many garbage days we have, because we have one for just generic garbage, we have one for recycling, and then we have one for what they call organic waste. And so at least 3 days out of the week, there's crashes and booms, and it unsettles my dog. I don't know why they can't just do it all in one day, and that way we can be in peace. But that's just how it is in Los Angeles, bureaucracy and red tape. So anyway, writing craft books. So basically what I'm telling you is check your pride and go get these 5 books. And again, this isn't like some list that attempts to be objective. When it comes to the arts, I'm very rarely hesitant to call something objectively this or objectively that, because I believe that art is supposed to invoke different emotions in certain people. This is something Van Gogh believed, and I kind of tend to write that. Now, there are things that are obviously bad. Like, if you look at movies, The Godfather is 100 times better than Sharknado, obviously. But I'm just saying, for me personally, I'm very hesitant. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm very hesitant to say that something is objectively this or objectively that, because it's not like art, because it's made by man. things made by man typically have shades of gray in them, depending on who you talk to. You know, it's not made in nature. Nature, of course, is objectively beautiful. Good and evil are objective standards, but like I said, when it comes to art, I'm hesitant to say this is objectively good or this is objectively bad. So keep in mind, this is a subjective list of 5 craft books that I personally have gotten some good information from, some good tools to help me. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. So first up, we have On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. Now, Stephen King is probably one of America's biggest writers. He wrote The Stand, The Tommyknockers, Cujo, Salem's Lot, a whole bunch of classics. And he's written so many books. I know I'm missing several because he also wrote several under a pseudonym. So so it's hard to name all his books. I just rattle off the ones I could think of at the moment. But he wrote this really good book on writing, a memoir of the craft. I keep saying memoir, it's actually memoir, I think. But anyway, and he goes through his writing toolbox is what he calls it. And he just has these amazing essays on what fiction writers need to know. Um, he talks about making characters and using different vocabulary and grammar and style, and he also has an essay written in the back of it, a section called "On Living a Postscript," and he talks about he actually talks about being hit by a van at one point, being caught in a hit and run. Um, it's very solid, especially when it comes to him talking about dialogue. That is one thing. Sometimes with Stephen King novels, now not necessarily with his short stories like The Mist, but sometimes with his novels, I think he doesn't know how to end them sometimes. He's actually has like a list of books he hasn't completed that he's still working on. The Dome was actually one of these. He had put it on hiatus for so long and finally finished it. And I really feel sometimes that he doesn't know how to end the books, so he just kind of finds a way where it'll give like a satisfactory ending. Now, The Stand was not this way. The Stand's climax was amazing. And like I said, his short stories, like The Mist, they tend to end pretty well. But I think it's just because he creates so many characters, and he talks about this in On Writing. So I highly recommend that you get that book. It's fantastic. Now, more genre specific, and this can be if you're into like me, where you like science fiction and fantasy. Orson Scott Card, who wrote, of course, Ender's Game and several other fantasy and historical fiction books. Orson Scott Card has this book called How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy. It's actually so popular that it's been included in like the whole book. It's not that long of a book, but it's been included in other how-to and writing craft books. For instance, writing fantasy and science fiction, how to create out-of-this-world novels and short stories. There's a section that's just Orson Scott Card's book. That's all it is. He is a genius when it comes to writing science fiction, especially. I haven't read too many of his fantasy works just because of just because I prefer his science fiction. It's nothing against him. It's just I think he's better at science fiction than fantasy. That's just my own personal opinion. And also, he wrote probably the best modern origin for Iron Man when he wrote Ultimate Iron Man volumes 1 and 2. His version of Iron Man is really good. It's got a bunch of science fiction elements that are fantastic in it. A few people didn't like it because it basically gave Tony Stark superpowers. But I didn't have a problem with that. I think that was actually pretty well. It was pretty well written. And I know he did that so because in the Ultimate Universe, which I don't like generally, but I do like Ultimate Iron Man, is a lot of the superheroes, some of them are kind of overpowered compared to their mainstream Marvel Universe connections. But I feel like giving Tony Stark superhuman abilities made sense in my mind. Anyway, that's just my opinion. on the matter. I really liked his Ultimate Iron Man, and his craft book, How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy. It's really good. He does a good job about explaining how to world build. He even has a section that tells you how to write queries and cover letters and how to find an agent. It's really, really good, just practical advice, and I highly recommend it. It's probably one of the best craft books that's genre specific that I've read. So now, if you're like me, you're a Christian and you want to write inspirational fiction, there's this book called Writing for the Soul: Instruction and Advice from an Extraordinary Writing Life. And it's by Jerry B. Jenkins, who, of course, co-wrote the Left Behind series. And a lot of people associate him with the Left Behind series, but he's actually has a way more extensive bibliography than a lot of people realize. He's a very prolific writer. He's written cop dramas, he's written science fiction, he's written historical fiction. And like I said, I know a lot of people kind of obsess over the Left Behind series because that's what we do these days. But like, I highly recommend his book, I Saw, which he wrote with James MacDonald, and it's supposed to be like a fictional biography of the Apostle Paul. But I like it because it connects well with the Bible, and he does a good job of building it. And anyway, his book talks about writing inspirational fiction, and crafting it, building characters. He also talks about how to um, how to keep the book interesting, because a lot of times people, and this is a well-known um, this is a well-known thing, that sometimes Christian books can come off as kind of cheesy because they don't have real conflict and whatnot. But if you read his books, he has this series called the Precinct 11 novels. I highly recommend those. Lots of drama, good cop stories, very interesting, very entertaining. And he also talks about writing nonfiction in this book, because he actually started out as a nonfiction writer. He would write sports biographies, and he also wrote a biography of Billy Graham. And he actually interviewed Billy Graham for writing it, and he tells that story. Very impressive writing career, and I highly recommend it. Now, if you are like, well, like, I get that, but I also want to know how to build great characters in these books. Brandilyn Collins, who writes Christian thrillers, and now again, her books are so enthralling, so intriguing. She was my favorite author for a time. She has this really great craft book called Getting into Character: 7 Secrets a Novelist Can Learn from Actors, and she talks about building great characters. And there's actually 2 editions. The first edition really talks about uh, using the method acting theory on creating interesting characters. And then she wrote a second edition, which I have not read, but the first edition is good. I still recommend it. But she wrote a second edition that 13 years later after the first one, that was really, like I said, the first one is really good. She uses great examples from great literary novels and from her own successful writing career. Highly, highly recommend it. Last, but definitely not least, and forgive the title, but this is my friend, C.S. Johnson, who I always recommend her books on my blog. She's a fantastic writer. She's a friend of mine, and I'm not just saying this because she's my friend. I really do like her work. That's one of the reasons we became friends, and she's been really helpful giving me advice on how to publish and whatnot. She wrote this book called Good Writing is Like Good Sex, sort of sexy thoughts on writing. And she talks about how to make the book intriguing, how to make it look exceptional, um, and how to make your books do good and write really clever dialogue. She gives her perspectives on the writing process, uh, and tells you how to make your story more special. It's very fascinating, and like I said, she has a genre-bending career, really exciting stuff. So I highly recommend her book. I can't recommend it enough. And she asked this question, so what's so special about your book? And she uses the idea of something being sexy as an example of this, how to make your book really well. So those are my 5 recommendations. Go out and get them if you want to start a novel career. And see what I did there? And go ahead and purchase all 5 of those, read all 5 of those, devour them, absorb them, because you're going to need it. And there's several more that I didn't name. These are just my 5 favorites that have helped me in my writing, in my short writing career. I'm hoping to extend it. Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Parler. It's at @RollJacobArry on all 3 of those. Facebook is Author Jacob Arry. YouTube is StudioJake. You can find my blog, jacobarry.blog, where I have even more articles on movies, on books, on television shows, on anime and video games, all kinds of crazy pop culture and nerd culture stuff. So definitely head over there. Speaking of books, get my fantasy novel, The Seven Royals, All Good Things. I know a lot of people are sequestered right now. They're practicing social distancing, as we like to call it. So pick it up, read it. It's going to be a good time. You're going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to go on these adventures with some of your favorite fairy tale characters. So you'll definitely want to grab that novel. You can get it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Kobo.com if you're on Rakuten, and of course you can get it on Walmart.com. I know it's hard to believe, but it is on Walmart.com. Head over there and get it. Finally, you can get it directly from my publisher at BookLocker.com. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.